Hi, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us today, whether you're here in the room or with us virtually. My name is Amy Penn. I'm a Public Information Officer with the Department of Natural Resources Incident Management Team. Today's briefing is going to focus on fire operations, weather and behavior, and a general update on where we are with the wildfire. The plan is I'm going to introduce each speaker. Each one will provide a short update, and that we think we'll be finished with that in about 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. After those 15 minutes of questions, we're going to release our operations folks to go back into the fire, and then we'll stay behind if anyone has any additional questions. Just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with statistics or some of the facts. The current acreage of the fire is 833 acres. In terms of structures, we have a preliminary estimate of 3 primary structures lost, 17 secondary structures lost. So that's a main dwelling versus a shed or an outbuilding. We had 1 secondary structure that was damaged. In addition to that, there are a variety, numerous equipment in yards or vehicles that are also damaged. So we don't have the numbers on those yet. In terms of evacuations, there were 100 properties originally that were evacuated. Those that were outside of the fire, once it was contained, were allowed to go back quite quickly, but those that remained within that fire footprint, they didn't go back until last evening. So everyone right now who lives within that fire footprint is able to go and come from their area. The fire area does remain closed to the general public, and that's about almost 13 miles of roads that are still closed at this point. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and get started with our update. So first we have Chris Seaman. Chris is our operations section chief for the fire today.
Hello and thank you. As Amy alluded to, I'm the operations section chief today. Yesterday I was engaged in fire suppression on the fire itself. I'll give you a little background on what took place yesterday. I'll give you a little background on what took place last night, and I'll bring you up to speed on about where we're at today. So yesterday at approximately 1300, so 1 p.m., the Coloma Fire Department and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources out of the Watoma Station were dispatched to a forest fire and a shed fire or an outbuilding on fire at the intersection of 6th Drive and Cumberland Road. The immediate report from the local fire department was that the fire was 10 acres in size and growing. And it was growing to the northeast, as you can see on the map. The fire grew very quickly due to the dry conditions that we are experiencing currently and due to the fuel type that it was burning in, oak and pine primarily. Numerous structures were immediately threatened on Cumberland Avenue. So structural protection and evacuations were the first priority of resources on scene. And a large number of structures were lost on that Cumberland Avenue. Fire containment on this fire was very difficult due to the fire intensity. There was a lot of crown fire in the pine, which means the entire tree was burning from forest floor all the way to the top of the tree. Very, very hard to get in front of to stop. That was also producing many spot fires out ahead of the fire, which is it's a small fire in advance of the advancing fire. It makes it difficult to contain because it allows it to get across roads, in which in this you can see that it jumped Cumberland Avenue, 7th, and Highway 21, along with other driveways and such within the fire perimeter. We had difficulty containing this fire. Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources had numerous bulldozers on scene, along with the Wisconsin operating engineers, supported us with heavy dozers to make breaks. There were slopovers that we had to contend with along the right flank of the fire. Bottom edge of the fire slopped over in several places, which means it got outside of our control line. Thankfully, we were able to contain those fairly quickly, but it also slowed our progress going along the fire. At approximately 8 p.m., between 8 and 9 p.m., a mineral soil break was ultimately put around the entire fire to contain it where it was. Overnight crews worked diligently to hold that containment line. Again, several fire departments spent the night, along with Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources equipment, spent the night on the fire to help hold fire where it was at. So where are we at today? So currently, We have, again, numerous fire departments, mostly from outside of the area, northeast Wisconsin. Several of them are from here helping us. And the fire departments are focusing on saving those structures that survived the fire front yesterday. Again, there's a lot of spot fires around them. There's several automobiles and other outbuildings that had burned, and we're trying to protect those structures that survived yesterday again today. DNR resources are working on the containment lines on the edge to ensure that no more spot fires or slop overs occur. Again, trying to hold the fire in the footprint that it is in right now. Yesterday, there was roughly 30 fire departments that helped us, that came in and helped stop this fire and protect structures, and also helped with evacuations. And that also included several law enforcement agencies such as Wisconsin County and the Wisconsin DNR wardens, along with Wisconsin State Patrol. Again, Amy alluded to the perimeter that has been set up by law enforcement around this fire. It's very important that non-residents stay out of the area for the protection of our firefighters that are actively engaged in containing this fire. There's also numerous utility companies out there, power, gas, them type of things, that are trying to also secure their utilities. So if you don't need to be in the area, please stay out of the area until we can get this cleaned up.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Al Lucchini. He's the Wisconsin County Emergency Management Director, and he's going to speak a little bit about the evacuations and available resources.
Hello, I'm Al Lucchini. I'm the Wisconsin County Emergency Management Director. As previously stated, we had to evacuate some residents out of the perimeter, the initial fire zone yesterday. We were able to accomplish that with the help of the Wisconsin County Sheriff's Office and the Wisconsin State Patrol. We were able to evacuate them and bring them here to the Coloma Community Center, and they were very gracious, opened the doors, and we were able to house them here for the majority of the evening until we were able to bring them back to their areas. As of right now, everybody is allowed that was in the perimeter area and outside the perimeter area that was evacuated are able to return if they're able to. We also ask anyone, since there are some power outages still in the area, if they have any animals that need to be tended to or taken care of, to reach out, and we'll see what we can do to help them with that. A lot of assistance was brought to us from the Wisconsin County Human Services, as well as the Wisconsin County Public Health. And if you need help, we're here for you.
Okay, thank you, Al. Next, we're going to have Aaron Young. He's the Deputy Incident Commander for the Incident Management Team. He's going to give us a little update on fire behavior and the weather outlook going forward.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to kind of represent the fire behavior analysis role today to describe the fire weather. How do we get here at this point in time? So, typically we have a spring fire season is what we focus on here in Wisconsin. And then we move into typically what's called a spring green up, where the grass, greens up, the trees leaf out, and that kind of usually brings the end of our fire season. And this is kind of a unique year where the lack of precipitation you see has kind of has entered us into a drought. Most of the states either abnormally dry or in sections of the state are now classified as a extreme drought. And I think we're on part of that area here. So with those drought conditions, the vegetation has become really dry and receptive to ignition sources. And that's what happened here in this case, like Chris explained. The difficulty in suppressing this fire is related to the dryness of that vegetation, and more related even to the wind, the weather conditions we're getting. So yesterday we had really low RH. We had a much stronger wind occurring than today. And that was really what's driving this fire, is that wind. So looking forward for today for our operations, with the RH is back, we have full sunshine. The RH is low again, but the wind is much less than yesterday, which should help us keep this fire in the footprint where we are today in our suppression. And then there are rain chances also coming up that are in the forecast. But a little bit of rain is not really what's going to get us out of our current conditions. It's going to take repeated precipitation to remove us from these drought conditions. So we'd ask everyone to continually check the DNR website, look for the Smoky Bear signs, where the fire danger is at. those areas that still have permit restrictions, what are those permit restrictions at? And continue to follow that for the safety of the citizens of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And finally, we have Bruce Henderson. He's the incident commander today of the incident management team.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. I'd like to share with you at this point that our investigation of the cause of this fire has been wrapped up. It was caused by debris burning. However, I'd like to point out that it's what we call a holdover fire. That means that the fire that caused this forest fire was not ignited yesterday. It was ignited prior to yesterday. So the issue there is that it wasn't put out. So just want to point out, if citizens are going to burn, it's really important when you're done burning to ensure the fire's out. We like to talk about it being cold to the touch, adding water to it, mixing it with a shovel, getting to the point where, again, it's cold to the touch so we don't have an unintended forest fire such as this. I'd like to point out too that if you cause a forest fire in the state of Wisconsin, per our state statutes, you're liable for suppression costs. And that's certainly applicable in this case. We can and do also conduct law enforcement as deemed appropriate based on the situation, based on the individual forest fire. That said, this fire burned in what we call the extensive forest fire protection area. That means the state of Wisconsin DNR suppression areas are divided in 3 parts. In the extensive forest fire protection area, we only regulate outdoor burning from January 1st to the end of May. Aaron just talked about, fire seasons. The reason we typically we do regulate in January 1st to the end of May is that's our typical fire season. Obviously, we're in a drought condition now. We are not getting normal rains, thus the situation here. So burning permits were not required here. Whether or not, permits are required, though, we do strongly suggest, given, again, the ongoing drought conditions, that citizens don't burn. There's obviously a lot of hazards associated with that, given the drought conditions. Finally, I'd like to just share that, we talked about, I just mentioned making sure fire is out, adding water, mixing it up. We'll be on scene. Our DNR resources will be on scene for several days. We do what we call mop up, which means we're putting the fire out. Our policy is that we're here until the fire's out. So it'll be several days depending on how it goes and weather conditions. That's both our staff and our extremely valuable fire department members that'll be here working with us until the fire's out. So not going to say when that'll be quite yet, but we'll be here for several days continuing to work on that. So that's what I have to share for today.
Great, thank you, Bruce. So just to wrap up, kind of the key messages here, the fire cause was identified today as debris burning. The fire is still burning within that containment line. So we're still working on suppression of that fire. As we mentioned, those roads continue to be closed for those that don't own property in the area. And for the public, it's to continue to be cautious with the conditions that we're in right now. In addition, we just want to put out there that there was a cat that was found in the area that is home. We have a fire department member has this cat. So if you hear anything, check in with us. So at this point, I'm going to open it for questions. Just get my attention. Okay, yes.
Amy or Bruce, how preventable was this fire?
Okay, so the question is, how preventable was this fire? So I would say this fire was definitely preventable. It was ignited by a human. It was a human caused, and when we burn, it's very important to make sure that the fire is extinguished and completely out.
Hold on 1 second, Amy. If there is anybody virtually that also has a question, please feel free at this time to raise your hand and we'll call on those one at a time.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Have the people who were burning, have they been identified and are they going to be fined, or what's the process?
The individual that was doing the burning has been identified. Like I said, the investigation has been completed. As far as the follow-up matters, we're still working on that. So as far as law enforcement and or suppression costs, I do expect that they will be held responsible for suppression costs per our normal procedures.
Is that a state? Is that a DNR thing? Municipal? I guess what category does that fall under as far as enforcement?
I'm not sure.
Is it a state fine or is it like a DNR ordinance fine?
Well, there's 2 separate things. There's the law enforcement part, which if there were a fine, that would be part of that. There's also the suppression costs. We look at them as 2 different things. What I'm primarily speaking to here is suppression costs. And that's both our costs as well as like I said, we work hand in hand with a lot of partners, primarily fire departments. We have memorandums of understanding with those fire departments where they can choose whether they bill or not. So when we bill a responsible party, it's for our costs and the costs of fire departments if they so choose to build.
Actually, before you go, you're saying 800 plus acres of land in a wildfire was traced back to one person.
Correct.
And that's a big deal.
It is. Yep. And, you know, again, we're in drought conditions and, yeah, that's why we encourage citizens not to burn when we have these ongoing conditions, whether burning permits are required or not. So those rules with, you know, when burning permits are required or enforced, those go back to our codes and statutes. Aside for if we go into, you know, some sort of emergency burning restrictions, we don't regulate, you know, this time of year in extensive forest fire protection area.
All right, Todd, go ahead. You can unmute. I'm going to turn up my laptop. Hopefully you guys can hear this.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we are all good.
I have a couple questions here. First of all, how many people were evacuated? And just to confirm, they have been allowed to return today. What's your most accurate acreage count at this point? And why was there no ban on burning permits given drought conditions?
Okay, so there were several questions.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Several questions. I'm going to try to hit those one at a time. The first question is the approximate acreage of the fire is at 830 acres. It is still considered 99% contained. We do have a line around it. The number of people that were initially evacuated were 100 homes. 60 of those remained evacuated. They ended up being within that fire footprint. And then what was the last question?
Including the emergency burn rates that are in place right now. So I can take this one. So for the extensive area where this is located, there's no permits currently that are in place. So that only occurs January 1st to the end of May. The only way that we would restrict burning is to implement emergency burn restrictions, and that would come from a governor's declaration, which is really it impacts campfires, fireworks, all outdoor cooking. It's really restrictive, and those conversations have been started, but to implement those would take the governor's declaration to go there. So at this time, there are no restrictions on permits or outdoor burning. There's just our website talking about when it's safe to burn. And what those conditions look like and where you can do that in the state. And that's where we encourage you to look at the DNR website for those conditions or those permit status.
Just say intensive versus extensive, so intensive or something.
Yep, and so there are the 3 areas of the state. There are intensive areas, and you can see this on our DNR website if you want to see the counties where you can click and see where your location is. But there is intensive coverage, which has permit restrictions in place right now. Extensive where permits have expired, and then other areas that are called cooperative where there is no DNR protection in place year round.
So local municipalities can deny people to burn. They have to be a government declaration.
The question is local municipalities with the authority to deny. Any township, town chair, fire department chief do have the authority to implement their own permit system or process if they want to pursue that, and they can do that through reaching out to the DNR, and we can provide some guidance on how, if they wanted to implement that, what it would take. So there is some authority there, but usually they rely on those that are in intensive and extensive rely on the DNR permit system usually.
You have an evacuation question? Okay. We know it's 100 homes. Do we know how many people were?
We do not know how many people were.
Is there any update on the 8 firefighters that were being treated for injuries?
Yes. Well, it's not new from yesterday, but there were a total of 8 firefighters that experienced medical issues that needed some kind of a treatment. We had 1 that was transported to a hospital and treated and released, and then the other 7 were treated on site and then went back to work.
Are they just smoke inhalation? burn?
Variety, none of them were burns, but a variety of different issues. Heat comes into play and exposure to smoke, things like that.
We're talking about how the fire started. Was it like burning off grass, vegetation? Or was it more like a burn barrel that were common in rural Wisconsin?
Debris burning, debris burning piles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was debris burning piles. It was quite a large pile. The homeowner was burning items within that pile, and again, not yesterday, previously. And then what can happen is embers can stay underneath a pile like that where there's sawdust and other things. They can stay there for a while, and the wind picks up, and then that can spark a wildfire. Yes.
Do you have a sense of how common it is to see fires like this in this part of Wisconsin County? Is this something unusual?
I think that. So wildfire is a part of life here in central Wisconsin. So it's not unusual that we would have a wildland fire in this area. Is called the Wisconsin Central Sands, and we have those dry soils, a lot of pine vegetation, and dry conditions. And when you're on these sandy soils, it doesn't take much. You go a few days without rain, and then we can be right back into fire staffing. What is unusual is this year is how fire staffing, we normally start in March, it has continued. It never ended. So we are still going strong with firefighters staffing all the way into July. And to have a large fire like this in July is unusual for us here in Wisconsin.
All right, Amy, we're going to toss it back over to one of our virtual attendants. Mike, if you go ahead, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Any idea on the dollar estimate of damage? That's question one. And then question two, historically, does anyone have an idea?
Mike, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. If you can go ahead and unmute.
Yep, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Unfortunately, this might be an error on my end. Technically, it sounds like other folks can hear you in Zoom. If you wouldn't mind, Mike, actually just dropping that in the chat, and I'll make sure that I get that out loud to Amy as soon as I can.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, at this point, we don't, we're beginning that process. It's a lengthy process. It will take some time. So at this time, as far as I know, we do not have that available, not even something preliminary. It will be a significant cost, that we can tell you, with that much equipment involved.
How long will that take?
Several days, I imagine. Possibly longer than that, because it depends. We'll be collecting that information as long as we're here, and as long as we're here, we will be on site for at least several more days at a minimum, depending on what happens with the weather.
Following up on Mike's question, is there a dollar amount yet on the damage?
Yeah, so dollar amount, question was, is there a dollar amount on the damage? And there is not yet. So not even a preliminary estimate is available right now. We're too soon into the process. We will continue to have resources on scene for some days yet. And that depends on what happens with the fire suppression and the weather. And so we will continue to work on that, but that is of high interest. And so we do have financial people on hand that are going to be starting to add that information up.
You mentioned a little earlier, you said 3 homes destroyed in this. Do we have any idea at this point of what's being done to help the residents of those homes?
That's what I thought.
So we have reached out to the American Red Cross, and they are assisting these families with temporary housing and financial assistance if needed.
Yes.
How much were the Omnic Midnight community, how much damage did they incur?
I don't think we can speak to that right now in terms of who was impacted. I mean, I'm aware that there's population in the area, but we don't have specifics. Yes.
Is there a way I can get a list of all the departments that responded to your fire?
Yes, that is possible. We do have that, and we can connect afterwards to get you an email.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, we do have another question virtually. We'll try this again and see if it works. And if not, Christian, we might have to have you write that in chat, but go ahead and unmute and see if the sound works this time.
Yes, hi, can you hear me? Hello? Anybody at all?
There we go. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good. Just a quick quick question. Do we know why it's called the Pallet Fire?
Pallet Fire. So, okay, the question was, do we know why it was called the Pallet Fire? And the answer is we don't know here. The way fires are named, it's there's an incident commander. It's called the initial attack incident commander. They arrive on scene, they do a size up, and they choose a name. And so we have some guideline suggestions for how you choose a name. I don't know what caused him to choose that name. Each wildfire has a name. They're different. Sometimes it's based on a road. Sometimes it's based on this. As to my knowledge, pallets were not. I guess truthfully, we don't know, but there seems to be no significance as far as I know yet. It wasn't pallets being burned. I think I can say that much.
So like a pallet fire is a type of wildfire.
No, the pallet fire is the name of the fire. So every fire has a name. So we'll talk about the Cottonville fire or the German Road fire. So each fire is named on scene, so it makes it easier to communicate by radio and everything.
Technical question. In the release, it said that the trees were torching. What does that mean?
Yes, so we talked about earlier about fire intensity and trees torching, trees crowning, spot fire. So a tree torching, again, you have a surface fire that's running along on the top of the ground, and primarily when a fire, the most susceptible fuel type to crowning is pine. So in that case, a surface fire which is coming across the ground, there's enough heat generated, and then it climbs to the top of that tree. And that can be from just a few feet of a small pine to 40 to 50 feet of a large pine. And I personally seen all of that yesterday as this fire was running. And that would be a torching pine.
How difficult, more difficult is it to contain that?
You bet. And that's an indicator of extreme fire behavior or intensity. And what a torching pine will do, or a group of crowning pines will do, is it'll send lots of embers downrange, downwind, which causes spot fires. So now we have the main body of the fire, and now we have fires out ahead, again, making it very difficult to contain, which is exactly what happened yesterday.
Todd, I see your hand raised in the chat. I am having some difficulty with the laptop. If you wouldn't mind just putting the chat or putting your question in the chat, and I will go ahead and just ask you.
Yeah, so we are going to be in the last one or two questions. We do want to get the operations folks back to the incident command post. So again, we'll stay, but anyone else have a question in the room?
I have one.
Okay.
Is there kind of a discussion at this point about, was the fire spread more because of maybe poor forest management, or is it more to blame on the dry conditions that are going on?
We all wanted to jump on that one, I guess. So at this time, it's about the fire weather conditions. We've really been in this dry stretch for the last 2 months after, it should have greened up, like we talked about. But this dry period that we're in, the drought that we've entered, has made the fuels in a position where it's pretty extreme fire behavior. And the difference, like from yesterday, is the wind. Yesterday we had winds about 20 miles an hour out of the south, and that is what drove the direction, and the shape of this fire is wind driven. So without that wind driving that, the wind driving is what made it hard to contain, and today's lower winds are what's going to help us keep this fire checked up and hopefully get it contained and move towards mop and putting it out.
Do you have two quick text questions in the chat? If nobody else here does, we'll get these two done.
Okay, this will be the last two. We'll do those and then we'll wrap it up.
All right. Does anyone happen to know where this fire ranks historically in terms of size, acreage, and management?
So that's a hard question. None of us are going to be able to answer that off the top of our head. We're at 830 acres. We've had fires much larger than that. In recent years, we had a 7,000 acre fire in 2013. In 2005, we had a fire that was 3,400 acres locally here. So, and we had 3,000. Yeah, we had a fire of 3,000 acres this spring in the same part of central Wisconsin. So, I would say, fires can get bigger in the spring. We plan for that. That's what we train for. But this is a significant fire, especially because of the number of people that were impacted, the number of structures, the number of people. That's what really makes it significant.
And final question.
With the acreage estimate yesterday being wrong, did that impact the response at all or affect the response at all and the fluctuation of the acreage throughout the afternoon?
Sure. So the question was, talk about a little bit about the fluctuation in the acreage that we were reporting. And I would say that the best way to talk about acreage is that it's an estimate. And so if you can imagine, we're looking at paper maps on a table, we're getting radio communication back and forth, we have a plane in the sky. And so I wouldn't say that it's so much that we got it wrong, is that it's a fluctuating number as you're trying to get an estimate. So that acreage still could change at this point. So some of it has been mapped, it hasn't all been mapped. And so we will continue to zero in on that a little bit closer. It did not impact at all the fire operations on the ground. Okay, so with that, I just want to take one moment to thank the media. Thank you for the ongoing coverage. You guys have been great. And then I also want to thank patients with the public, and especially those that are impacted. We're going to continue to be in the area and working around, and many fire departments and law enforcement agencies that have been assisting. So I want to thank this local community opening up the space for us, and we appreciate the hospitality. So thank you very much. With that, we'll finish, and I'll stay behind if there are more questions. Thank you.
News 3 Now is always on.
Get the Channel 3000 app, activate the push alerts, and we will send you breaking news, traffic, and weather alerts as it happens.
The Channel 3000 app. Get it now.
Powered by News 3 Now.